Yeah, I have the Eleventy conference website up here. This conference, I think we launched a while ago, maybe like, I don't know, 3 weeks ago. And yeah, we just sort of did the teaser of the website. Just had like maybe a newsletter registration on it, and had a few Easter eggs that I thought were kind of cool. We had this like confetti cannon that if you click the logo, it will shoot the cannon, which is kind of fun. The other thing I added that was kind of
I didn't see
an
that.
interesting thing is that you can hover over the possum and it will do like a little pin, and you can
That's amazing.
pop it. Yeah, just some interesting Easter eggs here. But the piece that we launched at the end of last week was the registration piece. So allowing folks to register directly for the event. I think we announced maybe the date of the event. We're sort of finalizing the time zone of the event. I had some discussions about that yesterday, so that will come out this week, I think. But yeah, we'll come up with some harder times around the actual schedule of the day of the talks and stuff. So look for that this week. I think we're also planning to launch the call for proposals. So if anybody's interested in speaking, they can submit to that. I think we're going to hopefully launch that tomorrow. So, but the piece we kind of want to talk about today is this registration piece. Now, originally we had this sort of everything was running through Button Down. So if you don't know Button Down, it's an email registration or email newsletter software. It's great. It's like a sort of like an indie company. I think it's only a couple people, and yeah, I think it's a really great like community oriented project, and I've been super happy with it. So yeah, we signed up for this just for the newsletter originally, but we kind of went all in with the registration to funnel everything through the newsletter. So the Eleventy ticketing actually goes through Button Down right now, which I don't know if that's like a novel thing, but yeah, that's the approach we went with, just to keep everything in one place. So if you're signed up for the newsletter, you're signed up for the conference, kind of. And I'll sort of go into the distinctions around that in a little bit. So I think maybe the best place to start, I don't know, Mike, if you have any questions, you can just jump in at any point. And also be looking at the chat.
Yeah.
See what's going on here, but
just want to say hi to Chris. Welcome. And shout out to Button Down. We're using it for the future Jamstack as well. And it's just a really nice, lightweight newsletter system without all the extra craft and things you probably don't need or want.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much power that sort of went into this, like, I don't want to say like reduced feature set, but a very focused feature set that they put into their software. It does what it's supposed to do very well. And I even put in a feature request as a result of going through this development process to something that would have made it a little bit easier. And I think we'll probably hit that a little later, but they've already shipped that to production.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, just within like a week, like just a couple of days, they've already made that improvement to their software. So yeah, shout out to Button Down. I think they're awesome. And definitely helped me launch this in a timely manner. Because I think if I had to write all of this stuff myself, it would have been too much. So maybe the thing that Button Down does for me here is that it accepts an email address. So all you have to do is put in your email address, and I'll put in mine here. And if you ever forget your ticket, you can just put in your same email address, and it won't create a duplicate ticket for you. It'll just give you the same ticket back. And then I hit register, and it brings me to this registration screen. And you can see the URL switched here to show /tickets, and then this sort of unique ID here. And it says, I'm registered. This is my virtual ticket. You don't need to save the ticket. I will send everything to your email address, but this has inserted me into Button Down as a subscriber to the Eleventy newsletter. And all of the subscriptions for the Eleventy newsletter are exclusive to the conference for now. But Button Down has like this tagging feature. So you can segment your insertions to be specific to the conference, and I'll go through that a little bit later too. So if you register for the newsletter through this process, we'll know that you're a conference registration. We'll know that you're specific to the conference. And yeah, maybe the sort of the neat development piece here is that we have like a little virtual ticket that we've generated. And there's sort of a bunch of different development pieces that went into this. There's kind of a couple of web components here. One is like this sort of 3D hover effect that distorts the ticket when you hover over it, which I got almost directly from a code pen and converted it to a web component, and I published that on my blog this morning. I think if you go out here, you can find the HyperCard web component. That's that little hover effect there. And yeah, I think it's also using this browser window web component that's also on my website. And then I think another one that it's using is, it's called a throbber, and that's like a throwback to the little animation that showed up in web browsers, like the Netscape logo in the corner, how it used to have those like stars falling from the sky. Yeah, that's the origin of the term throbber. It's like an awkward term, but yeah, it just means a loading indicator. And what that does is when it generates that ticket the first time, it sort of takes like a second or two because it's pulling in from a bunch of different APIs. And so what's happening with the web component, let me go out and show you. We have like a simulated version on the website here, is that there's a couple different versions here, but we're using, I think, this one. It shows like an animated gradient on top of the image while it's loading. And yeah, that's just maybe a nice little thing that we added. So let's go back here. Yeah, I think that's the 3 web components that we've combined here. And then we also have this sort of sharing button down at the bottom. That's a different web component. And that uses, it's called WebCare WebShare, but that's another one. I've published all these web components this week that I sort of built for this workflow, but this one's called WebCare WebShare, and it's uses the WebShare API. So if you're not on a mobile device, you probably won't see anything unique, but it brings up like the custom share, native share interface in your mobile device. So if you might see it used on a bunch of different sites, but when you want to share something on iOS, it like, do you want to text it to this person or do you want to share it on this app? It brings up all of that for you automatically, which I think is kind of neat. And then the thing that this web component does is it prefers that experience, that sort of native sharing experience, and then it falls back to a copy to clipboard on desktop, because a lot of that is not implemented. Web share API. A lot of it's not implemented on desktop browsers. So yeah, there's just not much support for it. So on a mobile experience, you'll get something really great. And on a desktop experience, you'll get just sort of a copy to clipboard. You can see the examples here on the demo of this. So we've wired up all these web components. We have the custom ticketing. If I share this on social media, I don't know what the best way is to do that, but maybe if I go back, if I go out to my, bring it up. Oh, here we go. Mastodon search. If I post this on social media, I'm probably gonna have to delete this right away, but I'll post it live. I don't care. It's fine. And then reload it here. It should show the ticket right here in the URL preview. So this is using Open Graph, an Open Graph image. And so we're dynamically rendering that image in the social shares. And that should work on Twitter. It will work on Mastodon. It will work on LinkedIn. all of the sort of social networks, Blue Sky, Threads, they all use this Open Graph API. And so if we look at the source code for this, you can see the Open Graph URL here is generated as part of this ticket. Well, actually, that is the shared URL. Here's the image that gets generated. So this is a lot of things sort of happening at once.
Yeah.
Maybe I should rewind a second. But that's the URL that gets called to generate that image that shows up when you share it. So maybe we should take a step back and go to the source code of the site so we can kind of dive into the code and see what's happening. Okay, so to start, this is all running through Eleventy. This is the Eleventy website. It's using WebC components to generate the content of the site. And then the serverless functions are actually running for the dynamic piece to do the registration through Cloudflare Workers. And the reason I use that instead of relying entirely on sort of button down forms. So if we open up, there's like a newsletter form, we can see the form that gets generated here as part of the registration. So that's this piece here, this newsletter form component. And you can see it's sort of submitting to our serverless functions, which is a Cloudflare worker. Through this API/register. And originally, when we first launched the site, this was just pointing to a button down URL. There were no serverless functions on the site. It was completely static, and everything was funneled through button downs, sort of dynamic. They controlled the entire dynamism of the registration flow. And so it submitted to button down servers directly and showed the registration workflow and the sort of success screen that was part of button down. But in order to have full control over the registration experience and control over what comes back after the register, I chose to go this route instead. So I have full control over sort of the button down APIs that I want to call and the content that gets rendered post-registration. So this page is actually dynamic. It's being rendered dynamically. It's not a static page. And if we let's bring it up in an incognito window. This is what other people will see if they go to the same URL that I share online. This is the sort of unauthenticated experience of viewing someone else's ticket share. And it has a button here, but it's the same. It's a lot of the same content, but even this URL is dynamic. This content is rendered dynamically. And we need to do that because the data that we're pulling from is dynamic, and those registrations change all the time, and we want access to the cutting edge data. Now, I think that there probably is a different way to architect this, and that these viewing pages could have been static too. And then the registration piece could have been dynamic. And I think that there's some probably very interesting lines that are being drawn here that could have been drawn a little bit differently. And if I had to redo it from scratch using what I know now, I might have done it differently. But I was able to sort of sneak by under the free tier of posting all this stuff. So
would it be more like a spa where it's the ticket is being like everything's static and then it's using like Ajax? Or
I mean, you could do it that way. And I don't think that I probably would do it that way, but that would be another option. I think the other The other thing that we could have done is sort of um, run a build every time someone registers,
I see.
which
Yeah,
is not maybe the
interesting.
best way to do it. But
Yeah.
um,
But with incremental, like if incremental was good enough and it's just
yeah,
building that one extra ticket or 10 extra tickets, like every, yeah, it's kind of interesting.
yeah. I mean, I think that you probably get into some weird like edge case race condition pieces where people try to share things before the URLs are generated.
Yeah, true.
But um, you could make that sort of part of your workflow where it has to wait for the build to finish before you.
Mm,
And you could put like a little status like on this page where it says, "Don't share it yet."
mm.
You can share it when this light turns green or whatever. But
In some ways,
I don't.
it's a great use case for ISR. Like you want the first
Mm,
request to be dynamic and then static afterwards. It's
yeah, for sure. Um, and I actually am not really sure if Cloudflare supports that.
mm,
They do have some caching APIs, but I didn't dive into that as maybe deep as I could have. Um, but again, I mean, the goal I was shooting for here is sort of staying under the Cloudflare free tier pricing,
mm.
and that was like I think 100,000 dynamic requests per day. Um, and let's see, I think maybe we can just go out and look at the metrics that I have on the dashboard. But I think even within the last, we're looking at the last week. I think we only got up to like 57,000 for the last week. So there was that big spike sort of in the first day.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, I think that it worked out fine. I
Yeah.
kept the sort of code for the ticketing piece very lightweight. And we can even look at these serverless functions if you want. But um, yeah, it's pretty lightweight and it doesn't really do all that much. It makes a call to Open Collective, the Open Collective API, to get single user's information. It makes a call to the Gravatar API
Mm.
because really the only thing we have to work from here is an email address.
Yeah.
That's it. So we're trying to build like as much as we can from that limited information that we have. So we're actually using like a WordPress API. It's like Gravatar is like a WordPress thing, which is kind of funny.
Originally created by Tom Preston Werner, I believe.
Oh, was it really? I didn't know
Yeah.
that. The Jekyll,
Yeah, I think
the
it
origin
predates
of Jekyll.
Jekyll.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and I'm super glad it lives on because I think it's a useful thing. Um, so yeah, if you aren't an Open Collective supporter of Eleventy, we will try and get some more metadata on you from Gravatar if you have one of those accounts, and that's all opt-in, of course. I did get some like uh, social posts from people about saying sort of like, where did this come from? Because people like haven't used Gravatar in a few years. Um, and yeah, it was sort of maybe confusing to see maybe some old screenshots of old websites that they built showing up on these tickets. But yeah, I think I only got a couple reports of that. But so yeah, I think I don't know where to go next. We could look at the sort of the dynamic functions
Yeah.
generate these.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
Um, and so yeah, this is all sort of Cloudflare worker specific things. And I think we've sort of talked at length about how it's kind of annoying that these like serverless APIs are not standardized cross-host. Yeah, it's not great. This is not like very portable code, and I think the more complex it gets, the less portable it will be.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean that is what it is. So yeah, I think we have this is like the ticket rendering code. If you try to post to it, it throws an error. But if you're just viewing the ticket, it sort of splits the URL, gets the unique ID. If it can't find it, it throws an error. And then we actually just check the referrer to see if it's to see if we want to show this page or the view page. I mean, it's just about as simple as can be, because there's no sort of uniquely identifying information on this page. Everything is just going through the ID, and all of these share content is all just very generic too.
Worth all the effort, in my opinion. It was a real delight to see my avatar and website and whatnot appear in the ticket after the thropper finished its thing.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, this wasn't. I mean, it was like somewhat of a development lift. It probably did take me like a week of work to put all of this together. But yeah, just seeing everyone share their tickets online, I feel like was huge.
Agreed.
It was. Yeah, it sounds like Chris is happy about that too. Oh, you were repeating Chris's comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't understand that. Okay. So yeah, we have this sort of rendering API, and that just calls a different, maybe this file, render page. And again, there's just not much to this. You can see that the full HTML is like in this page. And yeah, we just return the dynamically generated HTML as part of this rendering API. And I'll actually open source this code. I didn't actually realize that this was a private repository. Yeah, I have no problem open sourcing this. I think it's fine to have the source code be publicly available. I think the reason that it's private was I was working on the site pre-launch.
Yeah.
And that's the only reason the source code is private. But yeah, I'll open source that actually later this afternoon. So you can have full access to looking at how the source code is all wired up individually. But yeah, I mean, it's just you're registered, or if that referrer matched, we know you've just registered, and we generate a certain type of content. And then if not, if the referrer doesn't match, then we just show you the generic ticket view. And yeah, that's kind of it. All of that stuff goes through Cloud for Workers. We have a sort of like this fake layout rendering. I mean, ideally, if I could have like had unlimited development time, I feel like I would have maybe had a better templating system for this file specifically.
Yeah, I was curious about that. How would you do it?
Because I could have wired this up through WebC and generated those components dynamically, and that would have been a fairly like lightweight way to do it. But I mean, it would have been much better to have like the full Eleventy stack to generate this too. But again, I don't want to get in the business of like writing code for every single host that wants to
feels like it
their own thing.
I mean, I haven't done a lot of serverless, but if we take what they're all generally doing and build an abstraction library, like that doesn't sound too crazy.
No, I don't think so either. But it's I think it would be a somewhat light lift to build something like that, but the maintenance that goes into it would just be prohibitive, and no individual host is going to be interested in maintaining that. I mean, maybe like if you're a super like underrated host and you want to maybe steal some people from a different host, like if you're the underdog in that situation, maybe you would want to build that abstraction so you could bring people over to your service. But I don't know.
Yeah, it's
Definitely
not in
haven't
their
seen
best
it.
interest. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, I feel like I'm missing a space there. I feel like that's sort of a hard thing. And it makes sense why no one has built it.
Yeah. Try to wall garden serverless.
Yeah, I do wonder if maybe because I feel like I've talked to Ryan Carniato about this a little bit, and he works on Solid.js, and I think he farms out some of that to Vite. I don't know exactly like where the abstraction ends and where the custom code begins, but I don't know if some of that exists in Vite's stack too.
Mm.
But that would be worth looking into, I think.
Mm.
So I don't know where we're at right now. We sort of talked about the two different targets that get generated for the images. Maybe we can talk about how the actual image for the tickets gets rendered. Yeah, maybe that'd be worth talking about. So
Yeah, let's do
we
it.
sort of talked about how this was shared online, and inside of your social share, it shows you an image of your ticket, and that's the same thing that sort of gets rendered here. This is just a static image of your ticket. You can see the image shows up here. And this is the same image that we use for the Open Graph image URL that shows up in the page's metadata too. And if you look at it just points to the Eleventy screenshot API. So if we go to the Eleventy website in the docs, there is actually a section called API services down here. And we have, a screenshot API. So you can feed it any URL, and it will take a sort of wait for your web page to load, and use this Puppeteer. And then it will, generate an image of that web page. And this is using sort of ISR, or I forget what the other one is called. DPR? Dynamic. Yeah. ISR
Persistent
DPR stuff.
rendering.
Yeah, so the first request to that URL will be dynamic, and it will generate the URL, or generate the image of that rendering of the URL. And then if you request the same image a second time, it will just return the cached version of that. Yeah, and we have actually a nice like Open Graph size that you can pass in too. So it always generates this 1200 by 630 clipped image of a website. And so if we go back to the ticket here, we can show how this is just a static image. But if I take the ticket URL and I say ticket image instead of tickets, this is the website that I'm taking a screenshot of. So this is like a dynamic website. You can see the HTML that's used to build this ticket. And yeah, you can see sort of the weird borders that go in here. That's just a dotted, what is it? Let me look. Sorry, my microphone's blocking my dev tools.
Yeah, that's really smart. I feel like my first thought, if I was building this, would be like, is there some sort of node library where I can just render an image? But then you're dealing with this unfamiliar API, and it's probably very limited and things. It's really smart just having a website that you could use your skill set and basically do whatever you want.
Yeah, and this is how the Open Graph images on my website work. So if you go to any blog post here, if you scroll down to the bottom, it will say, "Are you sharing this on social media?" This is the Open Graph image that will show up here, and I actually have a link to the test page for this as well.
It's awesome.
So you can see the like the independent, and this is a static website. This isn't dynamically generated. This is all just static HTML.
Man, you just blew my
Um,
mind. Like that whole
yeah,
concept is so elegant.
yeah. I mean, I wanted to be able to create this stuff using HTML and CSS, and I think it's kind of there's a lot of power in that too, because if you see these like little circles here, that is just a border. That's a
Mm.
dotted border. It's just like a really large dotted border, and you can
Yeah.
see like it's sort of offset a little bit. And this right here is also just like the corners. They're just a radial gradients
Hmm.
um, using the same background. And so the shape is all like CSS generated.
Yeah.
And this sort of URL for my website that shows up on the ticket, that is just going through the same screenshot API. So it's even chaining those things together.
Very cool.
Yeah. And we have the possum image that shows up on top. It's a separate thing.
This probably already exists, but I feel like we need a CSS garden for competition. You have an image and everyone tries to create it in CSS. Like it really showcases just how flexible boxes and borders and padding and things can be.
Yeah. I feel like if you follow, I think their name is Anna Tudor, Tudor. Yeah, they are just incredible at sort of generating the most clever CSS imaginable. It just kind of blows my mind every time I see one of their demos. But yeah, I think if you like troll CodePen, kind of like I do
Yeah.
sometimes, you'll see just the most incredible code that people are just like sharing as something fun that they built.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I
I
think I got some of the information or some of the inspiration for like the CSS for even this was from CodePen too.
mm, yeah, such a cool
Um,
resource. Here's a
yeah.
few comments from Bob Monser. Welcome. You've given me a new idea for the screenshot API. Thanks. Me too. It's so cool. And then is the SS API time expensive at build time?
Yeah, I mean, I don't run it at build time. Those are all request time generated URLs. So in a way, it doesn't add any build time more than
Mm,
the example for my website adds a little bit of build time for the test pages here. These are all sort of statically generated pages. And so it needs to sort of iterate through all of my blog posts to generate a page for each of these.
yeah.
So yeah, I only run that on my production builds. I don't run it for local builds, but
Interesting.
um, yeah, I mean, the screenshot API is very expensive. Yes, I would not sort of run that locally, but because it's running in the cloud, as it were, then it doesn't add any build time to my local development cycle,
Mm.
which I think is great.
Yeah, it's awesome. And thanks, Chris. I've just put the link to Anna Tudor up there.
Oh, great. Yeah. Attribution.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so you can kind of see how even like I think this section is just like a rotated like using CSS section of the page, and yeah, that's a lot of how those images are generated. We just point that screenshot API towards this URL for every share image. Yeah, and you can see that how it renders there. That's just a static image. And the reason I did that is just to make those calls as cacheable as possible with the existing APIs that I already had in place. So like repeat views to this URL, if folks go to this URL and look at my ticket, this is all just, it doesn't make any API calls for this page to render this page. So in a way, there's no like external dependencies on this page other than the screenshot API. Because when a visitor views this page, it doesn't make any API calls to Open Collective. It doesn't make any API calls to Gravatar on second request.
Yeah,
even
it'd
though
be
this
like,
page is dynamically generated.
because you'd be
This image
DDoSing
is
them if
already,
you were.
yeah. I mean, this image is the only thing that is generated, and that's generated once. So yeah, I'm sort of walking this sort of fine line between like static and dynamic here, and trying to really, for the most exposed pieces of this, trying to eliminate as many external dependencies as possible.
Yeah. If you rebuild the site, does it reset all the cache, or they're just forever?
Yeah, great question. So the cache for the screenshots are only, well, there's two conditions at which I can regenerate those. If I rebuild the screenshot service, it will invalidate the cache for every screenshot that's ever been generated by the service. And I very rarely do that. I don't think I've done that in, I don't know, it's been probably a year, if I had to guess. But so the other sort of piece of control I have is in the screenshot API. If you feed it an additional, let me see if I can find, if you feed it an additional sort of parameter after this, so remember how we talked about this open graph size that shows up here? I've encoded the URL here, I have the open graph size, and then I have this sort of cache buster here. So the service has this sort of smart way to, if any of the URL parameters have an underscore, start with an underscore, then it treats that as an independent URL to the screenshot service. So I can control cache grouping in that way. If I want to bust the cache just for this specific site, then I'll just increment this to like a 5 or a 6, and this can be anything. Like, I think on my site I use the week of the year so that my open graph images are regenerated every week, because I do have a little bit of like metadata on there on some of them, although I don't see any on there right now. But yeah, it will regenerate those every week.
I guess the pinned would be
the what? Sorry,
that pinned, the top left one.
That is just a CSS piece on top.
Okay.
But yeah, I used to have like web mentions that show up, how many web mentions, but I don't see that on any of these. I think that what probably happened is it generated the image first, and it won't show the number of web mentions until the week after. Maybe if I go to like the popular section, it will show you some more dynamic stuff. No, I must have broke that at some point. I used to have like lighthouse scores showing on there, but then it just was too much, and I I got rid of those at some point. I simplified it down. But yeah, you can put any arbitrary HTML in there that you want, which I think is super powerful. So yeah. Yeah, I think the other thing that we're sort of talking about, I think David from the Cloud Cannon team suggested that we do like this sort of secret, like golden ticket thing. And yeah, I think I'm like obsessed with this idea now. So I think we'll probably do another round of like, check if your ticket is like this special next level thing, and maybe send out some free swag to people that win.
That's awesome.
But yeah, but the way that we would implement that is that I would just like set some specific conditions in this code and add some additional CSS to render like the ticket as gold, and bump this cache buster to version 5, and yeah, just relaunch or just commit to the site, and away we would go.
Yeah,
Um,
very clever.
so yeah, I feel like I'm sort of lost at this point. I don't remember what I've gone over and what I haven't gone over.
Yeah,
Um,
it's just such a clever system because it's like there's this idea that static websites are very limited, and this isn't a static website, but it's very static version of what it is. Like it's pushed towards being static. But just seeing you unravel this, you have so much control over everything. And like, yeah, if we want to add the golden tickets later, like it's pretty clear how to do that. And if there's something we want to update on the tickets, that's really easy. And it's not like I mean, it will have to generate hundreds of new tickets, but it doesn't need to do that all in one go. Like it's just such an elegant solution to this problem.
yeah, and I mean those images are only generated when someone requests them too. So
Mm.
if no one goes to view an image, then it won't be. I mean, the page won't be generated, and
Yeah,
even
which is
because the
great.
ticket HTML is dynamic, that page won't even be requested either.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that like the another interesting piece is that like the homepage of the conference website is static. There's no dynamic piece going into it, and we have sort of the form on the homepage, that this newsletter form piece that calls out to our dynamic API. I think the other thing we do on the homepage right now is I added like a little counter that shows how many folks are registered. Um, and that is just part of the Eleventy global data. So if we go into like our button down section here, you can see that once every 23 hours, it makes a request to this button down API. And then, yeah, just gets the number of subscribers. So
By
not too much
23.
to that either. I didn't want to, because I have a cron job set up to build the site every day.
Mm.
Um, and so if I ever wanted to sort of cache that request between builds, I wouldn't want to have a race condition between the cache being invalidated. I mean, I could have done like 23 hours and 59 minutes or 24 hours and 1 minute. Probably
Mm.
it's probably better to be shorter here, but yeah, if I ever end up caching that between builds, which I don't think it's doing right now, but I don't want it to sort of race between those two things. But even that
Right.
wouldn't be a real problem because it would just show yesterday's number
Mm.
for 24 hours, and then it would show yesterday's number the next day.
Mm.
So it would still be updated, but just maybe a day delayed because it was cached. And those caches were fighting against each other, but
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, let's see here. This is our homepage WebC code. We went through the newsletter form. Showed that. Let's see what else we got. I mean, I wasn't able to actually find a dedicated cron job section of on Cloudflare for some reason, so I'm just using this. I've used cron-job.org for a couple of other things.
Does that call just an endpoint every?
Yeah, it's like I think a webhook.
Mm.
Yeah, and I have the same thing set up for my personal site and then Eleventy. Yeah, and here's, I guess, the button down admin for my email specifically. I don't want to show you the full subscriber list of everyone on this everyone on the site, but I can at least show you how it looks in button down. Oops. And you can see that I sort of have this like 2024 conference tag assigned to my ID. And all of the subscribers that are being generated to the Eleventy newsletter right now are going to have this tag. Yeah, and that's kind of it. Not much to it intentionally.
Yeah, that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, do you have any other questions? Or I feel like I've sort of gone through the whole thing at this point, maybe.
Good call out, Chris. Conf.eleventy .dev if anyone wants a ticket. Do it.
Yeah, do it. And then share your ticket. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's going to be a bunch more work that goes into this site over time. I mean, we're going to have like an agenda that we'll have to put in here and have some interesting, like statically generated calendar links. And I've done a couple of like conference websites in my day, so I have like a pretty good idea of the things that go into it. I worked on some of the Jamstack conference websites, and then I also helped organize Nebraska JavaScript conference for many years. And even these sites, I think, were at some point Eleventy, maybe after Eleventy was created, like our 2017, 2018, 2019 sites were built in Eleventy. And I think that maybe one of the sort of big regrets that I have right now, or one of the things that I think is still outstanding, if you look at sort of this Nebraska JavaScript site, you can see if you can click through to all of the individual like events that we had and see sort of the static output of those. And those are all subdomains on the NEJSConf site, which is fine. And maybe that is the best way to do it, but I feel like I would love it if, just planning ahead for the future, if all of this conference sites could be on like subpaths instead.
Yeah.
So I don't have to do like a 2024.conf.eleventy, which just feels awkward.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would love to have all the URLs sort of segmented on a path.
That also not have a huge repo that has all the conferences.
Yeah, that's I feel like the big drawback is that you sort of get into this situation where you either have individual repos for every site and then you have to generate how does the build work for that? You sort of have to manage all of these redirects from a central place, and I guess you could have all of these as different projects. Yeah, maybe this is a new thing that I'll have to learn how to do.
Yeah, it's a good use case though.
Without having one big giant repo for everything.
Or like each year is on a different branch. So if for whatever reason you wanted to make historical edits, it is all in one repo. Just but the history would kind of get messed up from that. I don't know if that's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, I think that just with the stuff that I know how to do now, I think Netlify redirects handles this pretty well, because you can proxy redirect to things, but I'm not completely informed on what Cloudflare's options are there. So yeah, that will be something I'll have to learn, and hopefully they can do it. And if not, we'll be doing subdomains, I think. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's maybe all the pieces.
Yeah, I feel like that's a good overview. I love all the little details. Like that's what always blows me away with all of your stuff. Is just the thought and details put into it, and it's cool seeing the engineering that goes into all those little details too.
Yeah, thanks. That's really nice to hear. I do just love building websites, so
yeah, I think that's
I try
evident,
to make
right?
it not boring for me. while I'm building it.
Mm.
So yeah, learning a new thing or trying a different approach, or yeah, I think just doing some stuff I haven't done before.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think that the other really cool part of this is that this conference would not have existed at all without Cloud Cannon support. I mean, this site was built on Cloud Cannon time, and yeah, this is all like part of a Cloud Cannon initiative, and so yeah, I think that's worth acknowledging that, because yeah, if you see the care that's put into it, it's because I was given the time to yeah, put that care into it.
Yeah, that's a good, fantastic project to support. Nice. Well, I feel like that's a great overview. Maybe we leave it there.
Yeah, that's great. If you have any other
Nice.
questions, I will actually open source this repository this afternoon. I'll probably post about it on Mastodon or whatever other social channels the Eleventy project has. So if you're interested in the code, check it out.
Nice. And thanks everyone for joining. Chris, Bob, everyone else in the chat. Yeah, great talking today.
All right, see you all.
See you next week. Bye.